So to introduce our presenters, Sarah Hanson is an alumna of the Master of Landscape Architecture and Urbanism program here at Illinois Tech, and she's also an adjunct faculty member in the Masters of Landscape Architecture program, where she teaches Design Media 3. She previously has worked as a landscape designer, urban designer, and case study investigator. Prior to coming to Illinois Tech, Sarah received her BFA in fiber from the Maryland Institute College of Art. In addition to her work in landscape architecture, Sarah also works as a video producer at Furnace FPS here in Chicago. Matt is a recent alumnus of the Master of Landscape Architecture and Urbanism program. He currently works as a landscape architectural designer, and he's currently seeking his ASLA license. Prior to his work in landscape architecture, Matt has worked in community planning, nonprofit management, environmental education, and sustainable agriculture. His current research and design work involves the development of landscape projects that engage the public and that do work at the intersection of infrastructure and public spaces. Before coming to Illinois Tech, Matt graduated from Berea College with a degree in Spanish language and literature. So please welcome our presenters for this evening. And again, if you have any questions, please enter them in the chat box. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kristen, for that introduction. We are going to share our screen. Matt is doing the presentation, so bear with us for a moment while we get ourselves in the right place. But thank you so much for providing us this opportunity to present during this Alumni University lecture series. As you heard, Matt and I are both alums, so it's great to be a part of this on that level. And then I've also been teaching in the program for the last 4 years as well. So to dive right into what we're doing today, it is about the Landscape Architecture Foundation's Landscape Performance Series and specifically their Case Study Initiative program. If you're not familiar with the Landscape Architecture Foundation, it is a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. that supports the preservation and improvement of our physical environment. They invest in education of landscape architecture by providing scholarships, fellowships, various research opportunities for educators and students, among various other opportunities as well. So one of their programs is this Landscape Performance Series, Case Study Investigation. And Matt and I were selected as a research team for the 2019 cohort. University teams consist of a student and a faculty member, perhaps 2 students depending on the team, and they pair with a design firm to measure the benefits of designed landscapes. So I had participated in this program as a student in the MLA program while at IIT. So it was really exciting to do it again and be on the faculty side this time and work with Matt as the graduate student for our 3 projects. The research is pretty quick. It takes place over 6 months and is from February to August, and the bulk of the work is done once the semester ends. So it's a pretty fast turnaround. And we're not able to always go into as much detail as we may want to in some aspects, but we're still able to capture a lot of great benefits. So the 3 projects that Matt and I participated in during our 2019 project were all in the Chicagoland. They were the Nature Play Gardens and the Regenstein Learning Center at the Chicago Botanic Garden with Jacobs Ryan Associates, the Argyle Shared Street in Uptown with Site Design Group, and the Chicago Riverwalk phases 2 and 3 with Sasaki. The Chicago Riverwalk is probably how you know this new design. All of these case studies focus on researching quantifiable benefits and metrics in 3 main areas of environmental, social, and economic benefits for landscape architecture projects throughout the US and the world. So they may have some international teams participating at times. The research receives, or I'm sorry, the research team, us, receive initial consult from design firms to kind of learn about the general project goals and objectives. And then we really delve into determining what possible metrics might be based on discussions with the firms and available data that is out there, because our ability to really capture new data is a bit limited during that 6 month time period. That's from start to finish of the entire project. So we're not necessarily capturing a whole lot of new data, but really interpreting what data is out there and figuring out how they can be placed into quantifiable metrics and categorized as these three benefits. So we also partner with numerous other organizations and involved parties on the project to learn a lot more about the projects. And then during our research, we work to quantify these findings into the three categories: the environmental, social, and economic. And Matt will go into a lot more detail about some of those specific environmental and economic benefits. But I am going to quickly highlight some of the social findings that we gathered and thought were important, because all of these things help essentially to make the case that landscape architecture is really um, a necessary thing within our society, and beneficial component to the urban infrastructure. So hopefully some of this data that lives on the Landscape Performance Series website, part of the Landscape Architecture Foundation's um, website series, is helpful to help influence policymakers, governments, even homeowners or developers, anyone who is considering possibly funding and implementing various landscape designs within their communities. So the first one I'm talking about is the Regenstein Learning Campus at the Chicago Botanic Gardens. We have a before and after photo. So before was really just a large parking lot and a lot of unused grounds with mainly grass on them. And it is already an extension of the Chicago Botanic Gardens educational facilities and provides an opportunity for impromptu play, as well as organized nature preschool and field trips. There's, in addition to the outdoor grounds, they built this new building that you can see in the after photo as well. So that's a big contribution to their being able to have increased programming at the garden. However, as this is just a landscape architecture um, case study, we did not focus on any of the benefits that the building may include. So the grounds are meant to allow for an active exploration and unguided play for children to explore, create, and engage with natural elements, such as these undulating grass mounds. There's willow branch tunnels and also a water stream element on site. The Botanic Garden has really seen an increase in participation. You can see on the screen some of those numbers, but pre-construction to post-construction, they've seen a great increase in their formal programming as well as kind of drop-in educational programs. Um, and so moving on to the Argyle Shared Street, we saw this as kind of a typical, street, as you can see in the before photo. And then afterwards, it was really active, and people are able to use the space, the street, as actual active space as well. So it's located in Chicago's Uptown neighborhood near the CTA Red Line Argyle stop. And you can see how this street really has become a unique scenario in Chicago. It's the first of its kind as this shared street, which you can really see people walking down the middle of the street, which doesn't maybe happens, but we don't necessarily want it to on some streets. This is actually an active space for events like the Argyle Night Market and the Lunar New Year Parade. And both of these reported substantial growth in participants from pre to post construction. Um, we were able to survey business owners and event participants to capture this data, as well as we worked with the Uptown United organization, as well as the Alderman's office, to find out about participation in events um, prior to the 2019 year that we worked on this. So moving on to the Chicago Riverwalk, we looked at the phases 2 and 3, which are probably the most well-known ones in from today, from recent years. They are, really recognized throughout the city, nationally and internationally. They've been extremely successful in revitalizing the riverfront and attracting visitors. The city really was quite wowed and amazed at how this project has really surpassed a lot of its expectations in almost all regards, certainly economically and socially. On any given summer weekend afternoon, you would see nearly 800 visitors at the Riverwalk at any given time. Many of those patronizing the outdoor dining venues and participating in various leisure activities. There's kayaking opportunities, boat docking, and a lot of this data we captured through surveys on site, or actually going um, and observing and taking tallies and doing uh, various um, uh, visual calculations. So all of these different social benefits can be challenging to quantify in a landscape. And often the most common way that we were able to capture the data is through surveying visitors or doing um, site kind of site watches and observing and seeing how many people move throughout the space. And we're able to find several different benefits for each project through these types of um, measuring tools, basically. But it it certainly it can be a challenge, and through our case study, we were able to capture these benefits, and all of them are listed on the website for each of these individual sites. Um, and also, just considering the before and after of each of these, we can see how socially engaging they are, considering their before status. So really, these benefits are important to decision makers when considering a possible design that might be outside possibly what someone might think of as just a standard landscape project. Um, I'm going to let Matt take it away from here to go into more detail on stormwater and other benefits for each project. So let us know if you have any questions at the end.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Sarah, for the introduction to our work with the LA Performance Series. I was really excited to engage in this project, these projects. It was my first time really researching the benefits of landscapes and why I think both Sarah and I are here to do this kind of work. So I'm going to talk about these three projects first in relation to flooding, because flooding is a common concern in all of these projects. And in order to speak to these benefits, I would like you to imagine a 100-year rain event in Chicago. This is like 3 to 4 inches of rain over a 24-hour period of time. So lots of flooding. Buses and cars having trouble getting through. Because each of our projects, the Chicago Riverwalk, the Botanic Garden, Nature Play Gardens, and the Argyle Shared Street can accommodate this type of storm condition to a certain extent. So there are two strategies in managing stormwater that are represented in our sites. The first one I'll talk about that were found at the Nature Play Gardens, at the Botanic Gardens, and at Argyle Shared Street is this active strategy that considers how water infiltrates a site, how water is detained on site, and how it is either drained off site or towards a detention zone. And I'll speak to a passive approach that was found with the Chicago Riverwalk that considers the longevity, resilience, and durability of materials for a project that can last, so that a project can last for a while because of its ability to withstand extreme weather events. So active water management, brief understanding, is where water is guided and contained to regulate where water pools and where it drains on site. So it's a very simple idea here. We'll see it flooding downhill, detaining a site, and then it slowly percolates through the soil, depending on the soil conditions. And all of the soil conditions are good in our sense. Also within this active management strategy, we want to think about it in terms of land management and drainage management. So we observe measurable benefits for the flood protection and stormwater management at the Botanic Garden, at the Botanic Garden, Nature Play Gardens through water detention by land management. This is how land is constructed to hold water, and at Argyle Shared Street through the detention via drainage management, where water is guided where we need it to go. So land management is a highly engineered solution for detaining water. As you can see here, these were the drawings of some of the engineering partners that worked on this project. So you can see how much work goes into cutting and filling the land. But this exercise can yield some fun ways of playing the landscape, as we found in those hills in the Nature Play Gardens, as you can see pictured in the distance. So the Nature Play Gardens, as part of the Garden campus, exemplify detention via land management by detaining water through the gratings of highs and lows in the hill, shown in the back, and then also through rain gardens, which are on the peripheral edges of the frame. So also we are thinking about how the flood zones and the best management practices to manage water. So the Nature Play Gardens is situated next to the Chicago Botanic Gardens lake, as shown on the left. And this drains to the Skokie Lagoon and river. You can hike around Skokie Lagoons. I encourage you to do that. And these bodies of water contribute to the site's flood zone status, but also serve as drainage regions for the site. So the image on the right shows rain gardens, these rolling hills, and an open lawn that are all designed features that help manage stormwater and serve as a preliminary detention infrastructure to slow the release rate of stormwater, essentially the rate at which water re-enters stormwater infrastructure like large pipes, etc. So these words, big words, compensatory storage, this compensates for flood storage that's lost when you regrade a site. You have to figure out, when you any new construction, you have to figure out how soil is going to be taken away in order to accommodate for flood storage. And then you also have to think about the plants and the plants in the soil that are selected. So the reduction in the release rate is associated with this practice of compensatory storage, which was a necessary cut fill requirement on this site, as it's located in a flood zone. You had to increase it by like 50%. The ability, the flood storage. Compensatory storage required cutting amount of flood storage equivalent or greater than the volume of fill added due to the new building located on the site, demonstrated by the pre and post grade elevation markings that you can see here. And then soil and plants for the site were selected for their ability to infiltrate and be inundated with water. So in a 10-year flood, increased flood storage is demonstrated by the complete detention of stormwater up to an elevation of 628 feet. And partial detention of stormwater is possible up to an elevation of 631 feet for a 100-year flood event. So this reduces the amount of runoff that flows to the Botanic Garden, Lake, and the Skokie River. This other active management strategy I'm going to talk about is drainage management. So detention via drainage management uses primary and secondary measures. So in a situation you may encounter on a daily basis, walking across a path such like this path could be permeable. You have permeable pavers where the water drains in between the spaces in the pavement into the soil bed layer. And then where that system is overwhelmed, you can have secondary drainage system that drains the rainwater either to another place on site or to the offsite stormwater infrastructure. So we observed this at the Argyle Shared Street, this drainage management strategy. So as Sarah mentioned, it's the first of its kind in the city as a pedestrian-oriented street. But it also exemplifies detention via drainage management by detaining water in areas with subgrades that have high infiltration rates. And it also contributes to the design of the site. So you wouldn't know it necessarily by walking across the street, but the middle area, the actual street where cars drive, that is impermeable as a concrete layer beneath it. And so it's sloped to drain towards the sidewalk, where the sidewalk is permeable. The whole site doesn't have to be permeable in order to manage the water on site. So this water drains to a permeable hardscape. It also drains to these rain gardens. And these best management practices made it so that 100% of the rainwater that hits the site can be managed on site, which is really great. This is a really great benefit that we found. So here are some construction details. A simple permeable paving system was ideal strategy for the site because the subgrade used was known to have an infiltration rate of 4 inches per hour, significantly exceeding Chicago's minimum requirement of 1/2 inch an hour. It's really close to the lake, very sandy subgrade, easy for water to pass through. And as I mentioned, the impermeable streetscape drains to these infiltration planters and to this permeable space to accommodate that flood condition. Now I'm going to talk about the Chicago Riverwalks, this passive flood management strategy. Speaks a lot towards the materials more than the benefits that we were able to measure. So I just include a picture here. This is not the Riverwalk, just to specify. But traditionally, when dealing with shorelines, be it a riverside or a coast, like a lake or ocean coast, the task is to utilize materials that can handle continuous pressure from water hitting it over and over again. And this breakwater pictured here is a strategy that's often used. However, a more innovative approach to flood resistance, the Chicago Riverwalk yields benefits for project longevity in the face of flooding, while also serving as a pedestrian path and a beautiful riverside public space. It doesn't have to look like a piece of infrastructure. So we noticed flood resilience. The Riverwalk is quick to respond to flooding. The Chicago River generally experiences a 4-foot variation of water elevation during periodic flooding. as marked by the etched pylons shown in these images. It's also a really great way for the public to experience, what are these long, tall metal poles? It's a learning moment for the everyday citizen. And the jetty is also a prime example of this design for resiliency by using submergent and emergent plant species in floating wetlands. Also, this idea of durability includes teak hardwood that's used for benches. This is a waterproof tropical hardwood. Granite pavers instead of a softer limestone that can protect the Riverwalk vendor locations against damage, and carbon steel pylons that mark the water elevations that you saw. So I'm going to try to deep dive into, not deep, but dive a little bit more into the Chicago Riverwalk's additional benefits. The amount of time we had to do our research, we didn't find any conclusive benefits in relation to flooding and the cost savings of these materials beyond what we were able to observe and see documented during flood events. However, we did find a host of other environmental, social, and economic benefits that I'll go into. So our first measurable benefit is an environmental one, and this has to do with vegetation. The introduction of plant species transformed this industrial cargo route into a place for habitat, installing almost 20,000 square feet of flora, fancy word for vegetation, which designates the promenade as the quality of a natural area. That was a really cool benefit. So you can see here, the plant palette that Jacobs and Ryan Associates selected consists of mostly native species, each with a C value or a coefficient of conservatism that's designated. It's a way of measuring designated by a universal floristic quality assessment that contributes to the high floristic quality index. So it was those native species. So we can see a total score floristic quality index of 38.2, which is mostly attributed to native species that enhance the species richness of the area. A social benefit that was really cool to measure over time was that introduction of vegetation was a large contributor to the improvement of the scenic quality index. This is a measurement that evaluates the percentage of a scene captured in a photograph that contributes to a scenic view. So you can see here the shades of green that fit within this red line grid. The lighter greens are positive aesthetic contributors, those being vegetation in the pale green and a promenade walkway in the bright green. The darker green are those less aesthetic views, contributor, this large breakwater that distances you from the river. So after the river theater was constructed, we can observe a significant increase in the scenic quality with the introduction of these honey locust trees in the pale green. That's their shade area, and installed within the terrace promenade. And then that negative scenic value is also reduced with this promenade by increasing the user's proximity to the river. So this assessment was taken for each of the rooms in our phases. There were 5 rooms in our research. There are more rooms in the entire Chicago Riverwalk, but our Riverwalk that was designed by Sasaki, that's what we were looking at. So we backed up that scenic quality through assessment of user perception of the space. And the majority of users surveyed observed an improvement in the quality of the Riverwalk, be it aesthetic, environmental, cultural, or in terms of accessibility to the river. Lastly, the economic benefits. These were really the benefits that really tantamount to the success of this project and its acceptance by not only visitors, but by businesses and government stakeholders as well. Increased visitor spending has generated increased profits. These profits are attributed to the patronization of improved business spaces and the use of the river promenade. The design of these spaces, of course, thanks to the work of Sasaki as well as Ross Barney architects. So significant are these improvements that the city of Chicago is now able to revisit earlier phases of the Chicago Riverwalk construction in hopes of improving their quality in expectation of similar results of profitability. So these records of profit reflect the sentiments of business owners. Of the business owners here prior to the reconstruction, an overwhelming majority that responded to our survey were in agreement that this made their businesses more profitable. And looking at tax revenue, built into these vendor contracts of restaurants, water recreation, like kayaking, boat tours, were fees and taxes that were designated for the repayment of a $99 million federal loan. And the tax revenue gained from vendor profits exceeded expectations for repayment. So we're ahead of the loan. That's quick. So in conclusion, these 3 projects all yielded a lot of different benefits to people, to the environment, and to our overall economic well-being. We thank you for the time to present this work, and that was a lot. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask us in the time we have left.
Thank you so much, Matt and Sarah. So we do have some questions. The first question we have is from, I believe it's pronounced Yale, asking, is it possible that these presentation slides would be posted later for download?
I think that we can do that because all of this data is also already online with the Landscape Architecture Foundation's, the case study LPS series websites. So that shouldn't be a problem. We may need to just double check with LAF just to be certain, because it's technically their property now. But it should be fine. We'll make that happen with you, Kristen.
And we can also share the links to each of the project pages, which has introductory page like you saw, but also has the whole methods document that basically goes deep dives into all of these projects.
Oh, and it looks like Ron actually shared a link from the landscape from landscapeperformance.org that has some of these case studies in it. So we're happy to leave that in the chat if anyone wants to click on it, save that website. This is also being recorded as well. And this whole presentation will be on iat.edu/alumni university. So the next question we have is, was the location of the shared street chosen because of its proximity to a train stop?
So a lot of these, so our research on the projects wasn't from the beginning, obviously. All of these sites were already created. And one of the criteria of being selected for this research is that the project has been in existence for at least 3 years. But to answer that question, yes, I believe that the train stop was part of the allure to choosing that location. It's also prior to the redesign of it, it was considered like Asia on Argyle, and that's where a lot of, or Little Vietnam even, previously it's been referred to as, that's where a lot of small businesses are started, as a lot of Vietnamese business owners. And so I think that it was a CDOT project, as well as working with the alderman's office, who was interested in some of it. And so certainly some of it. Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say that site design groups, the project manager on that for site on that project, she was essentially, she was hired. She works for the Chicago Department of Transportation. Sorry, it's kind of complicated. She works for site, but she's like contracted out by CDOT. So she would, she handles those kind of projects. So I think that was definitely.
Yeah, part of the proximity to the train stop was part of it. Just in general, um, the location of the site was beneficial because this not only this train stop, but it kind of dead ends Argyle there at Broadway. So there might be a bit less foot traffic. We don't actually know all the reasons why that site was chosen specifically, because that wasn't part of what we got into in our research. Um, but some of the goals for it certainly were to see if this was successful to implement into other areas within the city. And site design has actually worked with CDOT to create some of these shared streets in other areas, one down by McCormick Center. I know for sure.
Oh, and actually, to piggyback off that, we were not able to get this benefit, but in our research, we found that CDOT they were tracking how many people got off of Argyle versus any other stop. But we didn't have enough data for the before and after the project to see if that number increased. So we were trying to see, like, okay, coming off of the train, was there increased traffic post project? But we just weren't able to. There wasn't enough data to find a conclusive benefit for that project.
So I think your answer may have just answered Yale's next question, but they ask how much info in the CDOT manual addresses similar strategies. So I think you may have sort of answered that, but if you have anything additional to add.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we know exactly the CDOT manual inside and out, but I would say that CDOT is looking at this model to implement in other parts of the city. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And
The-
Cynthia asks, were any of these planting materials used in these high-tech landscape plans of native credentials? Or has the state-of-the-art tech been surpassed by more contemporary analysis of varieties? I think she's referring to the plantings, or
Yeah.
I'm sorry, landscaping plantings. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I believe the native species selected they also selected varieties of those species that were, of course, bred to basically, when you develop a plant variety, you breed it for specific benefits, and so some of the varieties selected, of course, we're looking at, can they handle some of those benefits, especially pertaining to flooding? Can it handle increased inundation over a period of time? Can it handle, like, just some flooding, like partial flooding, or like being completely submerged, like submergent and what's that word? Submergent and not and emergent plants. So the variety of species were certainly considered.
But certainly all of the projects did make use of a lot of native plant materials. And yeah, the variety, like Matt explained, but they begin as natives.
So our next question is this information provided to the entities that oversee these three areas? And if so, do they know what action has been taken?
So that's an interesting question. We, as doing this research, we definitely provided our findings to the different kind of caretakers, I guess, as you will, of the projects. The Chicago Riverwalk is managed also by CDOT, and then the facilities and management 2FM does a lot of the actual maintenance on the site. And so we met a lot with them and kind of got their general information, reports, data that they had. And then we did share our actual findings with them. And so we're not exactly sure how they've actually taken some of these benefits and if they're applying certain principles or changing maybe some of their actions to kind of maybe even improve or continue to increase participation, whatever it may be. But they do all have access to them and they're online. So anyone can access the data that we have presented at that landscape performance series website. And there's Ron posted the one for the Riverwalk specifically. We can get you the direct links to the Argyle Shared Street and the Regenstein Learning Campus as well.
Perfect. And we can make sure that those are available on our website as well. We can link to them when we post your presentation.
Perfect.
So our next question is, could you talk a little about some of the recyclable materials that were used in those projects? So I think it may be recyclable or recycled materials that were used.
I'm not sure if there are any recycled materials used in the project. We thought more about durability, and when we think about, I think something that we thought about in terms of sustainability was through the use of those products is that, these are, if you select specific steel, specific rocks like limestone versus granite, granite being stronger, and specific hardwoods, you can find that they last longer. And so the overall environmental footprint by using those durable materials will be lower because of their ability to last a much longer amount of time. That was something that we were trying to display in our cost comparison and in our studies. And we just didn't have the time to really get into that. But those materials were selected for that purpose, for their ability to hang out longer and not degrade and have to be reinstalled and things like that. I don't think there were any. Can you think, Sarah? I don't know if there were any recycled products per se.
I'd have to double check, but the teak may have been reused from something else. The teak for the benches on the Riverwalk.
Okay.
But I need to go back and double check on that.
So, and I think our last question that we have so far is, could you talk a little bit about what the permitting or public hearings were like for these projects, if you had to go through them?
Permitting?
So if there were, I guess, like public comment or like what if there was a permitting process like through the city or a public comment period, did you have to go through any of that or maybe not?
For our research, no. I'm certainly for the Riverwalk and for other projects, the design process, they may have had to do public hearings and certainly permitting, but that was not part of our research.
We know they did for Argyle Shared Street, for sure. They had some conversations with community groups and businesses, but that, like Sarah said, that was at the design phase. That wasn't post-design. We did have the opportunity to survey businesses afterwards, but that was not part of the design project or permitting.
Okay.
Oh, and Terry did have a great point here that yes, at the nature garden, at the Chicago Botanic Garden, that they protected trees and transplanted them, also stockpiled topsoil for reuse. And we did look into some of that as well. I don't know that we were able to quantify a specific benefit for that. But yes, they certainly did reuse. Thank you, Terry, for reminding us of that.
So,
And the Riverwalk had several 10 permits.
yeah. Yes, thank you, Terry.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Yeah, we're
your
glad
answers. So I think we've reached the end of our questions, but thank you both so much. If anyone else has any further questions for Matt or Sarah, you can feel free to either contact them or to email us at alumni@iit.edu, and we can certainly pass your questions on. You have a few comments coming in that are saying thank you for the excellent presentation. So thank you both again. We really enjoyed your presentation this evening. Our next Alumni University presentation, we have two coming up in March 18th and then March 30th. The first will be with Ken Christensen, the second with Miriam Saleh. They will be kind of town hall styles, talking about their roles, Ken coming into the Armour College of Engineering and Miriam coming into Kaplan, and kind of their plans for the future of both of those two programs. So we hope that everyone can join us. Again, all of that information is at iit.edu/alumni university. And thank you again, Matt and Sarah. Really enjoyed this.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Thank you. This is great.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.